Hello and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In today's video, I am going to walk you through a full installation of Nextcloud on your Linux server. And your server can be running either Debian 10, Raspberry Pi OS, or Ubuntu 20.04. I have actually tested the process on each of those three. So if you are running one of those three distributions, then you are in good shape. In fact, there's only one command in this entire process that differs with my approach when it comes to the process for those distributions, and I will call that out when we get to it, but otherwise the process is exactly the same. Now, before we get into the content though, I want to let you guys know about the sponsor for today's video, which is actually me. I have written a book recently, Mastering Ubuntu Server 3rd Edition, and I just want to get the word out if you haven't already heard. You can check it out at ubuntuserverbook.com, and walking you guys through a Nextcloud installation is actually part of that book. But now I'm going to do a video version of that in today's video, but that's just one of the many topics included in that book, so please check it out. And if you already have a copy, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review on Amazon. That would really help me out. So now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get the process started for installing Nextcloud. So, let's go ahead and walk through the process of setting up Nextcloud. Now, first of all, I highly recommend that you set up a domain for your Nextcloud server if you can. Now, if the instance that you plan on installing Nextcloud on isn't actually a public-facing instance, then you won't be able to map a domain to it unless you set up a proxy, which is beyond the scope of this video. But if you are using a VPS or a server that is public-facing, then having a domain would be a great thing to have. But I'll leave that up to you. On my end, I am actually going to show the process of applying a domain to the Nextcloud instance. So if that's something that you want to do, you can follow along with that. Otherwise, you can skip this part and just refer to your Nextcloud server by its IP address. That's perfectly fine. So now I'm going to walk through the process of setting up a domain. I've already purchased one, and it's learnlinux.tv, and well, that is the domain for my website. So what I'm going to do is add a subdomain here, so I will add an A record, and for the host name, I'm just going to call it NC, obviously short for Nextcloud, and then I need to type the IP address of my instance right here. Now on my end, I decided to create a Linode instance. And again, it doesn't really matter if you are using a virtual machine, a VPS instance, a physical server. The instructions are all the same after the domain. But Linode is a sponsor of my channel, and I really do like their service, so it's really easy for me to create a quick instance to use for an example for this video. So I'm going to copy the IP address for this particular instance. I decided to set it up with Ubuntu 20.04 again. Debian 10 and Raspberry Pi OS are fair game as well. And here I'm going to paste that IP address into this field, and then I will click Add Record. Now, it's probably going to take about 15 minutes or so for the DNS change to propagate. It's not actually going to resolve quite yet. But that's okay, because it's going to take about that long for this process to finish anyway. So by the time we get to the point where we are going to add an SSL certificate, it should be ready to go. So again, I have this instance right here. I'm going to copy the IP address, and then over here on this workspace, I'm going to SSH into that instance. And I will leave it up to you to make sure that you are typing the correct username and password to get access to your Linux instance. And I will accept this by answering yes. I'll type in the password. It might help if I type that correctly. And there we go. So first, what I'm going to do is set the host name to match the domain name that I've chosen for this instance. And if you don't actually have a domain name, you should still go through this process. You can name it something simple like Nextcloud, that's fine. But there's two files that I want to edit. So I will type nano, and then I will edit /etc/hostname. And you might need to use sudo here if you don't actually have access to the root account. But since I'm logged in as root, I don't need sudo for this purpose. I'll press enter. And currently the host name is simply localhost. So I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to type in my case, the fully qualified domain name of nc.learnlinux.tv. And again, if you don't have a domain, then you can simply just type the name of your server, whatever you want it to be. Simplifying it down to Nextcloud is fine. So Control O and then Enter to save the file, and then Control X to exit out. Next, I'm going to edit the etc host file. And I'm going to add a new line here, and I'm going to make this 127.0.1.1. I'll tab over to keep everything aligned. And then I will type the same host name or domain name here that I typed in the other file. And that's what mine is, so I will save the file. Again, Control O, and then Enter, and then Control X to exit out. Now, it's a great idea to make sure that all of the packages on your server are all up to date. And for that, I will first run apt update. And again, use sudo if you are not logged in as root. So I'll press Enter, and this will refresh the package repository index. And it shows that we have 8 packages available to be upgraded. And to do that, we will run apt dist-upgrade, and then Enter. And then I'll press Enter again. So now we have all of our packages up to date. So next, let's add a user for ourselves if we don't already have one. Depending on how you've obtained your Linux server or how you have it set up, you may already have a local user. If you are logged in as root, as I am, most VPS providers actually give you a root account and leave it up to you to create a local user. In that case, you actually have to create a local user. But again, if you already have one, you should be all set and ready to go, and you shouldn't need to do this. So I am going to run add user, and then I will type the name of the user that I want to create. I'll just create it as me, my first name. I think that's good enough. And then I'll type in the password for that user. And again. And then I'm going to skip all of these prompts right here. I'll just keep pressing Enter. And then Enter again. And now our new user is created. To ensure that our user is able to use sudo, we can run usermod -a, uppercase G, sudo, and J, which is my username. Just change that for whatever your username happens to be. And there we go. So now we have a local user. We've installed all of the updates, and we have also set the host name as well. So what I recommend you do is just simply reboot the server. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'll press Enter. And then I will be right back as soon as this is finished. So now let's go ahead and SSH back into the server. Hopefully it's available. So I just changed the username to mine, same IP address. And there we go. I am now connected to my Nextcloud server, or what will become my Nextcloud server, and I am logged in as my normal local user. So next, I recommend that you install tmux, and this is optional, but I think it's a very good idea. So sudo, because I'm logged in as a non-root user at this time, apt install, and then tmux. And in my case, that was already installed. And a full walkthrough of what tmux is beyond the scope of this video. I do have an entire playlist with a tutorial series that will teach you everything you need to know to use tmux already on my channel. If you're interested, I'll put a card right about here. So go ahead and check that out if you want to. But the reason why I'm having you install tmux right now is because it gives you a layer of protection that I recommend that you benefit from. So I will enter tmux, and you can see that we now have this little bar here at the bottom. We don't have to worry about exactly what that does quite yet. Again, check out the series if you want to learn more, but I'll show you what it actually does. So I'm just going to type something. And let's just assume that my network connection went down, or my internet connection went down, and I lost access to my instance. I'll simulate that right now. And oops, I've lost connection to my server. And that would really suck if I was in the middle of the installation, and maybe getting disconnected from the server at just the right time will cause me to have to start all the way over again. That wouldn't be a great thing to experience. So I would SSH back into the server, And then I could simply run tmux attach just like that. And just like that, my session is restored. So what tmux will allow us to do is keep this running regardless of whether or not we are connected to our server. This session will stay alive in the background. So next, what we're going to do is download the zip file that we will use to install Nextcloud on our server. So for that, I'm going to move over to a web browser. I have already navigated to the official Nextcloud site at nextcloud.com. And then what I could do is click up here where it says Get Nextcloud. I'll go to Server Packages. And then we have the download button right here, but we're not going to click it. What we're going to do instead is right-click on it. And then we'll click on Copy Link Location. Back in the terminal, I need to make sure that we have wget installed. And in my case, I do. If I didn't, I could run sudo apt install wget just like that. But I already have it, so I won't need to do that. So what I could do is type wget, and then I could paste in the URL that I copied from the website, which in my case is this one. As of the time I'm recording this video, the current version is 20.0.6, but they are coming out with new versions all the time. So don't be surprised if by the time you watch this video, that they are up to a newer version. So anyway, I'll press enter. And now we have downloaded Nextcloud. We can see it right there. So now that we've downloaded the install file to our server, we have what we need to install Nextcloud, but we're going to come back to that because we need to prepare the server a little bit more first before we get that installed. And one of the first requirements that we need to set up is setting up a database server because Nextcloud needs a database server. And for that, we can run sudo apt install mariadb-server. I'll press enter, and then enter again. And now we have the MariaDB server installed, and that's what we're going to use to set up the database that's going to serve as the backend for Nextcloud. So next, I recommend that we set some basic security for the database server. Nothing too major, but we have a dedicated command that we can use. So we will run sudo mysql_secure_installation. And even though we've installed the MariaDB server, the command syntax for the secure installation script still reads MySQL, but we'll ignore that. It does work, so I'll press enter. And it's going to ask us a series of questions about our installation, so that way we can better secure it. So first of all, it's asking us to enter the current root password, and it's not talking about the root password for the Linux distribution. It's talking about the root password for the database server, but we haven't set one. So we're just going to press enter for none because there isn't one yet. And now it's asking us if we would like to set the root password. Notice that the Y is in caps, which means it's the default option if we don't actually choose one or the other. I could actually type Y and then press enter to answer yes, but I'm just going to press enter to accept the default of Y, less typing. And this will allow us to set the root password. So I will type in the password that I want the root password for the database server to be. And again, it's asking me if I would like to remove anonymous users. I'll press enter for yes. It's asking me if I would like to disallow root login remotely. In my opinion, I don't even think a database server should ever be remotely available. So of course I want to disable any form of remote login that I can. So I'll press enter for yes. And now it's asking if I would like to remove any test databases and access to test databases. And by default, it comes with one named test, so let's remove it by pressing enter. And then enter again to reload the privilege tables, which basically just refreshes everything. I'll press enter again. And we're back to the prompt. So next, what I'm going to do is run sudo mariadb. And you'll notice that the command prompt has completely changed. So now I actually have a command prompt to the database server itself. So at this point, Linux commands will not work. I need to enter database server commands, specifically MySQL style commands. And if you don't know what commands to use, well, don't worry because I'm going to walk you through everything. So first of all, we need to create a database for Nextcloud. So what I'll do is type create, and then database, and I type that in all caps. That's not required. But when it comes to database servers, it's standard to type the commands in all caps, but you don't have to type in all caps. But I'm going to follow the best practices here. And then we need to give it the name that we want applied to the database that we're creating. I'll just call it Nextcloud. Clever, I know. And we're going to end the statement with a semicolon, and I'll press enter. The database has been created, and to see that for ourselves, we could type show databases, and then of course a semicolon to end the statement. And we can see the third line down says Nextcloud, so the database has indeed been created. So the next command is fairly long, so I'm just going to paste it in right here. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a user, and that user is called Nextcloud. And then that user is going to be located at localhost, which means the user exists right here on this particular server. The line did wrap a bit, but I will have all of the commands that I'm using in this video in the official wiki page for this video that I will have linked in the description down below. And that user will be identified by a password of my password. Make sure that you change this. Make it a good password, a randomly generated password if you can. And make sure you store it in a safe place, because this is going to be the database that Nextcloud will need to be able to connect to. Now, because this is just a test instance that I will be destroying after I'm done recording the footage, I don't really care that the password is simple, but on your end, I recommend that you create a good password for this. So what we're doing is we are granting all privileges, literally all privileges, on the Nextcloud database and everything inside the Nextcloud database to a user named Nextcloud that exists here on the local server and is identified by this password right here. So again, change that password to something good and then press enter. So now we will run flush privileges, semicolon, make sure everything is refreshed, and then we can hold Control and press D to disconnect from the database server. So now we have a database to serve as the backend database for Nextcloud, and that's pretty cool. So let's continue on with the installation. Now, Nextcloud requires a web server in order to function. And I've decided to install the Apache web server. It's tried and true, it works great. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. Actually, the command to install the packages that we need is quite long because there's quite a few packages that we need. So I'm going to paste it in right here. And again, I have a wiki article linked down below in the description where you can grab these commands for yourself, or you can simply pause the video right here if you'd like to jot down these packages. Now notice that Apache is not among the packages that I'm installing here. But that's okay because Apache should be pulled in as a dependency. We'll check that. I'll press enter. And we can see right here that Apache is among the packages that are being installed. If for some reason you don't see Apache here, then make sure you add the Apache 2 package along with the others. So I'll press enter to accept the defaults. It's going to download everything and install all the packages, so I'll let it finish. And now, at this point, we should have a web server installed, Apache in particular, and it should already be working. And to verify that Apache is in fact working, you can go over to a browser, open a new tab, and then just feel free to paste the IP address right here in the address bar. And as you can see here, Apache is working. I typed in the IP address for my instance here, and we see the Apache 2 default web page. Your default page may vary depending on which distribution you are using, but you should see some sort of default page here. And in fact, now would be a great time to see whether or not your domain name, if you have one, has propagated properly and is mapped to this particular server. So I'll type it in right here. nc.learnlinux.tv in my case. And as you can see, I get the same page. So now I know that the domain is actually working. Now let's go back to the terminal. So let's go ahead and enable some PHP mods that we need for this to function properly. So we will run sudo php and mod, and then we will enable bcmath, gmp, imagick, and intl. And it's beyond the scope of this video to go through those particular extensions and what they do, but they do add additional capability to Nextcloud, and they also make it work better as well. So it's a great idea to go ahead and enable those, which is exactly what this command will do. We didn't receive any output, but I wasn't expecting to see anything, so we should be good to go there. Now the default Apache web page is, well, pretty cool, but it's not what we want. Now instead of that default web page, I'm sure we would prefer to see Nextcloud because that's the whole point. So let's get that installed. Now first of all, we need the unzip command. I could type which and then unzip to see if it's present. And it's not. So let's go ahead and install that then. Sudo apt install unzip. Enter. And the reason why we have installed unzip is because the Nextcloud file that we've downloaded is a zipped file. So we will need the unzip utility to extract it. And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So we'll type unzip space, and then the file name of the Nextcloud file that we've downloaded. I'll press enter. It's going to explode it into a bunch of files. And now that's extracted. So now that we have extracted the Nextcloud folder from the Nextcloud zip file, you can see it there in blue. We should actually rename that. Now my preference is to rename the Nextcloud directory to match the domain name. It's not required, but it's what I like to do. Keeps everything simple and consistent. So I will move the Nextcloud directory to, in my case, nc.learnlinux.tv. And now we need to change the ownership of that directory. So if I run ls-l, we can see that it's owned by my user and my group. So let's actually change that. I'll use sudo, and the chown command will allow me to change the ownership of that directory and everything underneath it. And I'm going to add -R, which is recursive mode. That will ensure that the syntax I'm about to execute will make all of those changes to not only that directory, but everything underneath it as well. And I will change the owner to www-data. That's the Apache user that's created automatically when you install the Apache package. And then colon, and again, www-data. That's the group that I want assigned to that particular directory. And then I'm going to give it the name of the Nextcloud folder as the object I want to change ownership on. That should happen pretty quick. So ls-l, we can see right here that the ownership has indeed changed. So now what we're going to do is we are going to move that directory into the location on the file system where it is going to live until the end of time or for the life of the server. And I'm going to move it into /var/www. So if I list the storage of var www, you can see that directory now lives there. So now let's disable that default site, the one that we saw when we first went to the IP address of the server in the browser after installing Apache. Let's actually get rid of it. And to do that, we can run sudo a2 dis site 000. We can actually press tab right here. It auto-completes it because it knows what file I'm referring to already when I start typing the first 3 characters. So that is the config file for that default page. I'm disabling that essentially. Now it's telling me that I need to run systemctl reload Apache 2 for that change to take effect. Let's go ahead and do that. And that was pretty easy. So now that we have disabled that default config file for Apache for the default site, we need to create a new one that's going to be the config file for Nextcloud itself. So sudo nano /etc apache 2 sites-available, and then inside that directory I'm going to call it nc.learnlinux.tv, my domain, and then I'm going to add .conf at the end of that file name, and then I'll press enter. This is a brand new file. It's an empty file. So what I'm going to do is paste the contents right here, and you can get a copy of that yourself from the Wiki article. So there it is. That is the configuration file for Apache that enables it to serve Nextcloud when people visit our domain or IP address if you don't have a domain. Just make sure that you adjust everything in this file to match reality on your end. So for example, if you did not name your directory for the Nextcloud installation files, as I did here, and you probably didn't because unless you have this domain, you probably named it something else. Just make sure you change that and that you change the server name here as well. And then here, I have the path to the Nextcloud directory yet again. Make sure that matches. Same thing here. You can name that accordingly. And here as well. So let's save the file, Control O and then enter, and then Control X to exit out. And even though we have created that configuration file, it's not actually active until we activate it. So sudo a2 nsite, and in my case nc.learnlinux.tv.conf, and then enter. And it's telling me that I need to reload Apache for this to take effect. I'm not going to do that just yet because I have further changes to make to Apache. I may as well reload it all in one shot. And the next thing that we want to do is configure PHP. And this is actually the one command that differs based on the distribution that you're using. So what we're going to do is edit a text file, and the main difference is that depending on your distribution, the text file might be in a different location. So sudo nano and then /etc/php 7. On Ubuntu 20.04, it's going to be 7.4 for this part. If you are running Raspberry Pi OS or Debian 10, in that case, it's going to be 7.3. If in doubt, just type 7. And then press tab, and it's going to autocomplete whatever it's supposed to be. And that's literally the only thing in this entire process that is going to be different depending on the distribution that you're using between the three that I've tested this process on. Then inside there, you should have an Apache 2 directory. And the file we are going to edit is php.ini. Now, inside this file, there's a number of different things that we are going to tweak. Now, the trick in Nano is you can hold Control and press W, and that brings up the search box. You can see that down below. And in the Wiki article, I have a list of all the parameters that we are going to edit here. The first one is memory_limit. I'll press enter. We see it right here, currently set to 128 megabytes. And we're going to bump that all the way up to 512. So Control W again. Let's search for something else. This time it's upload_max. And it's actually upload max file size, but you don't have to type the whole thing to search for something. I think that's good enough. I'll press enter. It's set to 2 megabytes. I'm going to bump that all the way up to 200. Control W again. We're looking for max execution time. Currently set to 30. And we are going to change that to 360. The next thing that we are going to search for is post max size. So I'll just type post_max. It's set to 8 megabytes. I'm going to change that to 200. And then the next thing, date.timezone. And it is commented out. I'm going to remove the semicolon in front. And at the end, I'm going to type America/Detroit. If you don't know what yours is supposed to be, then just visit this URL right here and see if you can find that out. There's all kinds of different time zones. I can't go over them all, but this is correct for me. Next, Control W again, opcache.enable. I will uncomment that. That's all I needed to do for that. Opcache interned strings buffer. I'll just leave it as that. There it is. And 8 is the correct value, but I wanted to uncomment that. Control W again. It's opcache.max accelerated files. I will uncomment that as well. 10,000 is a good number for that. Another op cache value, this time memory consumption, which is actually right there in front of my face. I'm going to uncomment that as well. And actually 128 is correct. And I will uncomment that as well. Next, opcache.revalidate. I will uncomment that as well. And I had to search again because I pressed something wrong, not sure why. But anyway, I'm going to change that to 1. And then I will save the file, Control O, and then Enter, and then Control X to exit out. Now, there's actually some Apache mods that we need to have enabled as well. So for that, we will run sudo a2 nmod, and then dir env headers, mime, rewrite, and SSL. These are all recommended by either Nextcloud or things that I've run into and found that I've needed. It's beyond the scope of this video to describe each of these, but these are mods for Apache that extend its functionality. I'll press enter, and many of these have been enabled already. That's okay. It doesn't matter if we run that command, we just want to make sure all of those are enabled, and now they are. And now we need to restart Apache to take advantage of all those mods. So sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. And then we can check the status. And as you can see, it's running. If there were any errors, if you've typed something improperly, then Apache may have failed to restart. But it's green, it's active and running, so we're good. So now let's actually configure Nextcloud. It's partially working at this point, or at least it should be partially working. Let's check. Now here I still have the default web page that's on my screen right now. This no longer technically exists. Well, it does exist, it's just not enabled anymore. If I refresh this, it should change over to Nextcloud. Let's see. And would you look at that? We now have Nextcloud installed, and technically it's running. So we need to create a new user for ourselves. I'll just use my first name. Then it's kind of hidden right here, but I'm going to tab over. And then I'm going to create a password for myself. The data folder we can leave alone. Scroll down. Database user, we use Nextcloud for that. And then for the password, this is the password for the database that you set up earlier. In the Wiki article, as well as on the screen, you saw me type it as my password. And I recommended that you change that to something secure, so hopefully you have done that. Whatever your password is for the database, you add that right there. And then for the database name, we set that to simply Nextcloud, just like that. And I will leave this checked right here, install recommended apps. And then I will click Finish Setup. And this part can take a while, so we'll just let it run. And now we have a successful installation of Nextcloud. And go ahead and go through this little welcome here. I'll leave it up to you to read this if you want to. And we're actually good to go, but there's a few things that I recommend that you do that's going to benefit this. So let's go back to the terminal. So our installation will actually benefit by enabling a memory cache. And one of the packages that we have installed has actually already provided us what we need. We just have to enable it. So for that, we will run sudo nano/var/www and then your Nextcloud folder name. Inside there, you should have a config directory. And inside that directory, you should have a config file, config.php. And we do. And this did not exist until we actually set it up in the browser. So we'll go to nearly the end. And about right here, we'll just press enter and then space a couple of times there. And then I'll paste it in right here. And we have installed the package that's required to enable APCU. So here we're just telling Nextcloud to go ahead and load that. So Control O and then Enter to save the file, and then Control X to exit out. It was that simple. So next, what I recommend that you do is actually correct the permissions of the config file. You want to actually make the permissions for that file different than the other files and folders that are inside our Nextcloud folder. So we can run sudo chmod 660/var/www Nextcloud folder config and config.php, the same file that we were editing before. And then similarly, we're going to recall that command. We can run chown rather than chmod for this step. And we're going to change the ownership to root:/www-data. So effectively what we're doing is we are making it so that this config file is owned by the root user and the www-data group. So I'll press enter. And let's go ahead and make sure that we didn't break anything. Let's go back to the page. We can refresh it. And it still works. So let's go ahead and click on our name right here and go to Settings. And then under Administration, we'll go to Overview. And this is going to check for any issues that you might have. And it's telling us that we are connecting over an insecure connection. We'll fix that shortly. But it's also complaining about missing indexes. Let's go ahead and fix that. Back on our terminal. Let's run the following command. Sudo php/var/www Nextcloud directory occ space db : add -missing -indices. Press enter. Hopefully I don't have any syntax errors here. And well, it looks like that worked. So now the final step is to create an SSL certificate. This is not required. You could actually end the video right here and begin using Nextcloud. But if you do have a domain and your server is publicly available, then I recommend that you go ahead and finish this. So let's install the certbot package, which is Python 3-certbot-Apache. I'll press enter, and then I'll go ahead and accept the defaults, and that will install all the packages that are required to support the certbot utility, which is actually the utility that is used by Let's Encrypt to facilitate obtaining an SSL certificate, which is exactly what we're going to do right now. Now back on the web page, note that it is in fact an insecure connection, so this verbiage right here was not lying. Let's see if we can fix that with the next command. So we will run sudo certbot --apache-d and then the domain name to our Nextcloud server, which is that one in my case. I'll press enter. For the email address, we just put in the email address where we want to actually get the notifications if there's any problems. So I will type mine in. Press enter. Then I will type a capital A to say that I do agree with that notice. And it's asking me if I would be willing to share my email address with the EFF. They already have that, so I'll say no in this case. And it's actually working. And at this point, it's asking us if we would like it to automatically redirect to HTTPS. And I see no reason not to do that, so I will answer with 2, and then I'll press enter. And we're good. And I also want to make sure that Apache is refreshed. This might not be necessary, but I will run sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. Let's check the status, make sure that that is working. And it is. Q to exit out of that. And back here, let's refresh the page and see what happens. We have the green padlock here, so we know that the certificate has been successful. And we do have a warning here about the strict transport security setting. You can go ahead and check that out if you'd like. But I think at this point, you have a Nextcloud server. It's working. It's secure. It's awesome. Everything was a complete success. So there you go. I hope this process has been a success for you and you now have your very own nexNextcloud server. I love working with Nextcloud. It's one of my favorite open source applications, and it's awesome to be empowered to run your very own cloud where you call the shots, which I think is exactly the benefit of running Nextcloud. Now be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. I have some awesome content coming very soon, and I will see you in the next video.